Death rode the Colorado wind that morning, carrying whispers of what was coming to Clearwater Valley. Martha Langley stood on her porch, coffee growing cold in weathered hands while her eyes tracked dust clouds rising from Millfield's main street. Something ain't right. Could feel it in her bones like a storm brewing over the high peaks. 2 years since Tom's funeral, 2 years of empty rooms and silent suppers, and now this itch between her shoulder blades that meant trouble was riding hard toward her door, the kind of trouble that left good folks buried and bad ones rich. Wind rattled the loose shingle Tom never got around to fixin', and Martha's fingers tightened round that cold tin cup. Valley was changin', and change in these parts usually meant blood in the dirt. Today felt different, though, like destiny was fixin' to come knockin' whether she answered or not. Question was, would she be ready when it did? What kind of trouble do y'all reckon is brewing in that dust cloud? Drop your theories in the comments, hit that heart if you're ready for some frontier justice, and follow along to see if Martha's got the sand to face whatever's coming down that trail. The auction block stood like a gallows in Millfield's dust-choked square, and Martha Langley felt her blood run cold as Winter Creek water. 3 figures huddled on that weathered platform, young men, maybe boys, hoods yanked over their heads like they was condemned prisoners waitin' on the hangman's rope. Strong backs, all of 'em! The auctioneer's voice cracked through morning heat like a bullwhip, spittle flyin' from tobacco-stained lips. $3 each for prime workin' stock, guaranteed to pull their weight or your money back. Workin' stock. Like they was cattle bound for slaughter. Martha's hands trembled round her mare's reins, leather slick with sudden sweat. Been 2 years since Tom's funeral, 2 years of empty rooms and silent suppers, and she'd thought her heart had done all the breakin' it was gonna do. But watchin' them bidders holler numbers, treatin' human souls like sacks of grain at harvest time, something deep in her chest cracked wide open. That same hollow ache she'd carried since the preacher threw dirt on Tom's coffin. The smallest figure swayed on his feet, thin shoulders shaken beneath a torn cotton shirt. Couldn't be more than 12, 13 at most. Same age as the boy she and Tom never got to have, the one she'd lost that terrible winter when pneumonia swept through the valley like God's own judgment. $4 for the young'un, called out a voice from the crowd. He'll do for cleanin' stalls. Martha's vision went red as forge fire. Ain't failin' nobody else like I failed Tom, she thought, heels diggin' into her mare's flanks. Not today. Not ever again. $9 for the lot. Her voice carried across that God-forsaken square like thunder before the storm, silencing every other sound except the wind rattling through dry cottonwoods. Every eye turned her way. Suspicious glares from bidders who'd lost their prize, calculating stares from men in fancy suits, and one pair of cold blue eyes that made her skin crawl like something was walking over her grave. Cyrus Blackwood himself, standing in the shade of Henderson's General Store, with his arms crossed and a smile that'd freeze hellfire. Well now, the auctioneer stammered, clearing his throat like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. $9. That's a mighty generous offer, ma'am. It's a done deal, Martha said, dismounting and marching toward the platform with purpose burning in her veins. These boys ain't property, and I ain't lettin' 'em be treated like it. The auctioneer glanced nervous-like toward Blackwood, who gave the slightest nod. Sold to the lady in black, he announced, though his voice lacked conviction. Martha counted out 9 silver dollars, each coin ringing against the platform like a bell tolling for the dead. The boys were led down, hoods yanked off to reveal faces that had seen too much hardship for their tender years. The eldest, maybe 17, had shoulders carved tense by trauma and eyes that trusted nothing and nobody. The middle boy looked practical and wary, like a cat that had been kicked too many times. But it was the youngest that near stopped her heart. Dark eyes, high cheekbones, and skin that spoke of mixed heritage. When he looked at her, Recognition flickered across his young face like lamplight in a storm. "Ma'am," he whispered, voice barely carrying over the crowd's murmur. "I dreamed about you, the kind lady with sad eyes." Martha's breath caught in her throat. Dreams. Lord help her, what kind of strange providence had brought these boys into her path? "What's your name, child?" she asked, kneeling down to meet his gaze. "Milo," he said, then quieter. "Milo Crowfeather." The eldest boy stepped forward, protective instincts sharp as a blade. "Lady, you just bought yourself a heap of trouble. Them boys ain't for sale usually, and the man who owns them don't take kindly to interference." "Owns you?" Martha's voice turned dangerous. "Nobody owns another human being, son. What's your name?" "Beck," he said after a pause. "Beck Morrison. This here's Harris Chen." He nodded toward the middle boy, who watched everything with careful calculation. "We been workin' for Mr. Blackwood's operation for nigh on 2 years now." The way he said workin' made Martha's stomach turn. She'd heard rumors, whispers about men disappearing, about accidents that weren't accidents, about folks who crossed Cyrus Blackwood ending up in shallow graves or simply vanishing like smoke in the wind. "Well, you ain't workin' for him no more," she said, standing and brushing dust from her black dress. "Y'all are comin' home with me." A shadow fell across the platform, and Martha turned to find Wade Garrett, Blackwood's enforcer, standing close enough she could smell the whiskey on his breath, scarred face, gun-heavy belt, and eyes like chips of winter ice. "Ma'am," he said, voice soft as a snake's belly but twice as dangerous. "Mr. Blackwood would like a word." "Mr. Blackwood can go to hell," Martha replied, surprised by her own boldness. "These boys are free now, and they're leaving with me." Garrett's hand drifted toward his gun. "Don't reckon that's how this works, widow lady." The square had gone quiet as a cemetery, folks backing away from what looked to be turning ugly. Martha's heart hammered against her ribs, but she stood her ground. Been too long since she'd stood up for anything that mattered. "Beck," she said quietly, never taking her eyes off Garrett. "Take the boys to my horse." "Ma'am," Beck started. "Do it. Now." The boys moved, and Garrett's hand closed on his gun grip. "I don't think so." That's when Martha pulled Tom's old Colt from beneath her shawl, the one she'd been carrying since the night riders started circling her ranch. Wasn't much of a shot, but desperation had a way of steadying a person's aim. "Touch that iron, and you'll be meeting your maker," she said, voice steady despite the fear coiled in her belly like a rattler ready to strike. Garrett laughed, but it sounded forced. "You got sand, lady. I'll give you that. But sand don't stop bullets." "Neither does being a yellow-bellied coward who picks on children," Martha shot back. "But I reckon we're about to find out which one of us bleeds first." The standoff stretched like taffy in August heat. Then Beck called out from beside her mare, "Ma'am, we best be riding." Garrett's eyes flicked toward the boys, and Martha saw her chance. "Next time you want to dance, Wade Garrett, you come callin' proper-like. But today, these children are going home." She backed toward her horse, gun never wavering, while Garrett's face darkened like storm clouds over the high peaks. When she reached her mare, she holstered the weapon and swung into the saddle with practiced ease. "Can y'all ride?" she asked the boys. "Yes'm," Beck replied, already helping Milo onto the horse behind Martha while Harris grabbed the mare's other stirrup. "Then we best light out before—" Gunfire cracked across the square like thunder. Dust exploded where Martha's horse had been standing a heartbeat before as she wheeled the animal around, boys clinging tight. "There's your answer, lady," Garrett roared, drawing his second pistol. "Should have minded your own business." Martha spurred her mare into a dead run, hooves thundering on sun-baked earth as more shots rang out behind them. The boys held on like their lives depended on it, which they surely did, while Martha leaned low over the saddle horn, guiding them through Millfield's narrow streets with bullet-splintered wooden signs and shattered storefront windows. They rounded the corner by Murphy's saloon at a full gallop, scattering chickens and drawing curses from folks diving for cover. Behind them, she could hear more horses joining the chase. Garrett and whatever gun hands he could muster on short notice. "This way!" Beck shouted in her ear, pointing toward a gap between buildings. "Cut through the alley!" Martha didn't question how he knew the town's layout so well. Time for questions later, if there was a later. Right now, keeping these boys alive was all that mattered. She guided the mare through the narrow passage, her knee scraping against rough-hewn boards while hoofbeats echoed off the walls like drum beats. They burst from the alley onto the north road, open country stretching before them like salvation itself. Martha's ranch lay 5 miles ahead, and if they could reach it, she had enough ammunition and stubborn will to hold off an army. "How much farther?" Harris called out, voice tight with fear. "Close enough," Martha replied, though Garrett's riders were gaining ground. Her mare was carrying 3 extra bodies, and even the finest horse had limits. But as they crested a low hill, Martha's ranch came into view. Weathered buildings clustered round a sturdy house, the whole spread nestled in a valley that had been home for 15 years. Almost there, almost safe. A rifle crack split the air, and her mare stumbled but kept running. Martha felt blood trickling down her arm where the bullet had grazed her, but pain was something to worry about later. "Hold tight, boys," she hollered. "We're going home." They thundered into the ranch yard in a cloud of dust and desperation, Martha hauling back on the reins as the mare skidded to a stop near the porch. The boys tumbled off, legs shaken from the wild ride, while Martha grabbed Tom's old Winchester from the saddle scabbard. "Inside," she ordered, but Beck was already scanning the horizon. "They stopped," he said, pointing toward the ridge where Garrett and his men sat their horses like vultures waiting for something to die. "Why'd they stop?" Martha studied the distant figures, unease crawling up her spine like a centipede. "Don't know, but it ain't 'cause they gave up. Men like Garrett don't give up easy." As if summoned by her words, the riders wheeled their mounts and disappeared back over the ridge, leaving nothing but silence and the taste of trouble in the air. "Come on," Martha said, guiding the boys toward the house. "Let's get y'all fed and figure out what comes next." But as they climbed the porch steps, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever came next was going to test every ounce of courage she had left. The boys were safe for now, but safety was a fragile thing in this hard country, and men like Cyrus Blackwood didn't take kindly to folks interfering with their business. Inside the house, she settled the boys at her kitchen table and started putting together a proper meal. First, one they'd likely had in Lord knew how long. But her mind kept wandering to that ridge, to Garrett's cold smile, and to the question that gnawed at her like a hungry wolf. What kind of devil had she just declared war on, and did she have the sand to see it through? Outside, thunder rumbled over the mountains, and Martha Langley knew in her bones that the storm was just getting started. The kitchen felt different with voices in it again. Martha ladled stew into chipped bowls, watching the boys eat like they hadn't seen proper food in a month of Sundays. Beck sat rigid as a fence post, eyes darting toward windows between every bite. Harris ate with careful efficiency, storing energy like a man who'd learned hunger was always lurking round the corner. But it was Milo who made her heart ache, the way he savored each spoonful, closing his eyes like he was memorizing the taste of safety. "This here's the finest stew I ever had, ma'am," Milo said, voice soft as summer rain. "Tastes like home should taste." Martha's throat tightened. Home. When was the last time this old place felt like home instead of just a collection of rooms haunted by memories? "You boys can call me Martha," she said, setting down her own bowl. "And there's plenty more where that came from. Y'all are gonna need your strength." Beck's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Strength for what?" "For whatever comes next," Martha replied, meeting his wary gaze. "Men like Blackwood don't give up easy. and I reckon we ain't seen the last of his trouble." The boy's face went pale beneath the dirt and bruises. "Ma'am, you don't understand what you're messin' with. Cyrus Blackwood, he ain't just some local bully. He's got his fingers in everything from here to Denver. Judges, sheriffs, railroad men. Folks who cross him end up dead or wishin' they were." Martha studied Beck's young face, seeing knowledge there that no boy his age should possess. "How'd you come to know so much about his business?" Beck's eyes went guarded. "You pick things up when you're working for a man. Hear conversations you ain't supposed to hear." Liar, Martha thought, but kept her voice gentle. "Boy's hidin' something, but pushin' now ain't gonna get me answers. Well, whatever you heard, it ends here. This ranch is sanctuary, and I aim to keep it that way." After supper, she settled the boys in the spare room, the one she'd been savin' for the children she and Tom never had. Brought out quilts her grandmother had stitched, set out Tom's old clothes that might fit, and tried not to think about how right it felt having young voices in the house again. "Ma'am?" Milo appeared in the doorway, looking small in one of Tom's old shirts. "That man today, Mr. Blackwood. I seen him before." Martha's blood chilled. "Where, child?" "In dreams," Milo whispered. "Bad dreams. He was standing over graves, counting money while children cried." Beck grabbed Milo's shoulder, perhaps harder than necessary. "Boy's got an imagination, ma'am. Nightmares from what we been through." But Martha saw the fear in Beck's eyes, the way his hand shook before he controlled it. These boys knew more than they were tellin', and whatever secrets they carried might be the key to understanding just what kind of snake pit she'd stirred up. Once the boys were settled, Martha took a lantern to Tom's study, a room she'd avoided for 2 long years. Dust motes danced in the golden light as she opened his desk, fingers trembling over papers she'd been too grief-stricken to examine. "Should have gone through these long ago," she thought. "Maybe if I had, Tom would still be—" She pushed the guilt aside and focused on Tom's careful handwriting. Bills of sale, correspondence with neighboring ranchers, routine business. Until she found the folder marked irregularities, hidden beneath a false bottom in the drawer. Her breath caught. Page after page of Tom's meticulous notes, documenting accidents that weren't accidents, land sales under duress, workers who'd disappeared without trace. Names, dates, patterns, all pointing toward one man orchestrating a campaign of terror across Clearwater Valley. "Too many good men dying convenient deaths," Tom had written. "Blackwood's operation goes deeper than land grabbing. Something about workers, about contracts that ain't legal. Need proof before I can act." The last entry was dated 3 days before Tom's fatal accident, thrown from his horse on a trail he'd ridden 1,000 times before. "Oh, Tom," Martha whispered, tears blurring her vision. "You were trying to stop him, weren't you? And it got you killed." A floorboard creaked behind her, and she spun around to find Beck standing in the doorway, eyes wide with recognition. "You found him," he said quietly. "His papers about Blackwood." "You knew?" Martha's voice was sharp as winter wind. "You knew my Tom was investigating?" Beck's young face crumpled. Not exactly. But I heard Blackwood talking to his men about the nosy rancher who stuck his nose where it didn't belong. Said the problem was handled permanent-like." His voice broke. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I should have warned somebody. Should have—" Martha crossed the room and pulled the boy into her arms, feeling his thin shoulders shake with grief he'd been carrying too long. "Weren't your fault, child. You were just trying to survive." But even as she comforted Beck, her mind was racing. If Tom had been murdered for digging into Blackwood's business, what did that make her? She'd just declared war on a man who killed anyone who threatened his operation, and she had 3 innocent boys depending on her protection. "Beck," she said gently, "how much do you really know about Blackwood's operation?" The boy pulled back, wiping his eyes. Too much, he admitted. More than any kid should. He's got contracts with men all over the territory. Fake papers that make slavery look legal. Buys orphans and runaways, works them till they die or disappear, then gets fresh ones. Been going on for years. Martha's stomach turned. And the law? Some of 'em are bought. Others are scared. And some... Beck's voice dropped to a whisper. Some just disappear when they ask too many questions. A sound outside made them both freeze, the soft nickering of horses moving careful-like through the darkness. Martha blew out the lantern and eased toward the window, peering through a crack in the curtains. 3 riders sat their mounts on the ridge overlooking her ranch, silhouettes black against star-scattered sky. As she watched, one of them raised what looked like a spyglass, studying her house like a hawk studying a rabbit. They're watching us, she breathed. Beck joined her at the window, and she felt him stiffen. That's Fletcher and Kowalski, he said. Blackwood's scouts. They're mapping the place, learning how to get in quiet-like. For what? To take us back. Or, Beck's voice faltered, or to make sure we don't talk about what we seen. Martha's hand found Tom's pistol where she'd left it on the desk. 3 boys sleeping in her spare room, counting on her to keep 'em safe. Tom's investigation papers proving Blackwood was a murderer. And now scouts circling like wolves, waiting for the right moment to strike. Beck, she said quietly, does Blackwood know you boys can identify his operation? Names, places, methods? The boy nodded miserably. We're witnesses to things. Things that could hang him if the right lawman ever heard him. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Martha realized the storm she'd sensed this morning was closer than she'd thought. Not just weather, but something darker. A reckoning that had been building since the day Cyrus Blackwood decided human lives were worth less than the profit they could generate. She watched the riders disappear into the night, but she knew they'd be back. Men like that always came back, and next time they wouldn't be content to just watch. Get some sleep, she told Beck. Tomorrow we're going to need to make some hard choices. But as the boy padded back to his room, Martha remained at the window, Tom's gun heavy in her hand. Sleep wasn't going to come easy tonight, not with death riding the wind and children dependent on her courage. Outside, a coyote howled lonesome across the valley, and Martha Langley felt the weight of destiny settling deeper on her shoulders. Tom had tried to stop Blackwood alone and paid with his life. But she wasn't alone. She had 3 boys who'd survived horrors that'd break grown men, and together they might just have enough sand to finish what Tom started. The question wasn't whether trouble was coming. The question was whether she'd be ready when it knocked on her door with guns drawn and murder in its heart. In the distance, lightning split the sky like God's own judgment, and Martha knew in her bones that the real storm was just getting started. Dawn broke gray over the valley, clouds hanging low like smoke from a dying fire. Martha stood on her porch, Tom's Winchester cradled in her arms, watching dust rise from the main road. Company was coming, and in times like these, company could mean trouble or salvation, sometimes both at once. 3 riders approached at an easy lope, and Martha felt her shoulders relax when she recognized Clara Whitehorse's weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The Cherokee woman rode flanked by Samuel Polk from the bank and Tom Morrison, no relation to Beck, despite sharing a name, the deputy who'd lost his own spread to Blackwood's legal maneuvering 2 summers past. "Morning, Martha," Clara called, dismounting with the fluid grace of someone who'd been riding since childhood. Her braided shawl caught the weak sunlight, silver threads glimmering like promises. "Heard tell you had some excitement in town yesterday." "Word travels fast," Martha replied, though she wasn't surprised. In a valley this size, everybody knew everybody's business before the dust settled. Samuel Polk shifted nervous-like in his saddle, banker's suit dusty from the ride. "Martha, what you did, Buying them boys from Blackwood's auction. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning chill. That's dangerous territory you're walking into. More dangerous than letting children be sold like livestock? Martha's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut glass. Deputy Tom Morrison swung down from his horse, badge catching what little light filtered through the clouds. His face was carved hard by grief and anger, the look of a man who'd lost everything that mattered and was still standing out of pure, stubborn will. "Polk's right about the danger," Tom said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "But some things are worth the risk. Blackwood stole my ranch, killed my cattle, and left me wearing this badge like a collar. Been waiting 2 years for someone with enough sand to make a stand." The front door creaked open, and Beck emerged, followed by Harris and Milo. The boys hung back, watching the newcomers with the wariness of young animals who'd learned that strangers usually meant pain. Clara's eyes went soft when she saw them. "Lord have mercy," she breathed. "Children, come here to me." Milo stepped forward first, drawn by something in the older woman's voice. Clara knelt down, gentle hands framming his face as she studied the bruises and hollow cheeks that spoke of systematic cruelty. "I know that look," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "My people wore it when the soldiers came, when they took our children to their schools and tried to steal their souls." Tears tracked down weathered cheeks. "How many more are out there, child?" "Dozens," Milo said quietly. "Maybe more. They keep 'em in camps up in the canyons, move 'em around so nobody gets too curious." Samuel Polk's face had gone white as fresh snow. "Sweet Jesus," he muttered. "I knew Blackwood was buying up land aggressive-like, but this... traffickers? Right here in our valley?" Martha pulled Tom's investigation papers from her apron pocket, hands steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "My Tom found out. That's why he's dead." The silence that followed was thick as honey, broken only by wind sighing through the cottonwoods. Clara took the papers with reverent care, reading through evidence that painted their valley as a hunting ground for predators in expensive suits. "Forgeries," Clara said finally, pointing to a contract with Blackwood's signature. "These work papers got no legal seals, no territorial stamps, just fancy words designed to make slavery look legitimate." Beck moved closer, recognition flickering in his eyes. "That's the same paper they used on us. Said we owed money for food and shelter, that we'd work it off in 6 months. Been 2 years now, and the debt just keeps growing." Deputy Tom's jaw worked like he was chewing nails. "Debt peonage. It's illegal under territorial law, but if you got judges in your pocket..." He trailed off, implications hanging in the air like storm clouds. "So what do we do?" Harris spoke up, voice steady despite his youth. "Can't fight 'em legal-like if the law's bought. Can't run 'cause they'll just find more kids to hurt." "What's left?" Martha looked around the circle of faces, young and old, scared and angry, but all united by the recognition that evil was feasting on innocence, while good folks looked the other way. "We stop him," she said simply. "Whatever it takes." Samuel Polk's nervous laughter cracked like thin ice. "Martha, be reasonable. Blackwood's got money, influence, armed men. What have we got?" "We got each other," Clara said, standing and brushing dirt from her riding skirt. "And sometimes that's enough." Tom Morrison nodded slowly. "Been nursing my grudge for 2 years, waiting for the right moment. Maybe that moment's now." "And maybe it'll get us all killed," Samuel protested, though his voice lacked conviction. Martha gathered the forged contracts, holding them like the damning evidence they were. "Tom, my Tom, tried to fight this alone, and it cost him his life. But we ain't alone. We got witnesses." She gestured toward the boys. "Evidence." She lifted the papers. "And most important, we got the will to see justice done." Beck stepped forward, young face grave as a preacher's sermon. "Ma'am, you don't know what you're up against. Blackwood's got camps all through these mountains, armed guards, men who'd kill their own mothers for the right price. And if you think the law's gonna help— Some laws are written in courthouses, Clara interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. Others are written in hearts. The law that says children shouldn't suffer, that families deserve protection, that evil shouldn't prosper. That law don't need no judge's approval. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the ranch yard like omens. In the distance, thunder rumbled over the peaks, and Martha felt something shift in the air, a sense of purpose crystallizing from desperation and rage. "We need a pact," she said. "All of us together. To protect these boys, to stop Blackwood's operation, and to make sure no more children suffer what they've suffered." "A blood oath," Milo whispered, dark eyes bright with something that might have been hope, like the old ways when promises meant something. Clara smiled through her tears. Child's got the right idea. Some bonds run deeper than legal papers or threats of violence. Tom Morrison drew his knife, a worn blade that had seen honest work and hard times. Been carrying hate for 2 years, letting it eat me alive from the inside. Time to turn that poison into something useful. One by one, they each pricked their thumbs, letting blood drop onto the forged contracts. Martha went first, her crimson drops staining Blackwood's false signature. Then Clara, her Cherokee blood mingling with the others. Tom Morrison, years of suppressed rage finally finding purpose. Even Samuel Polk, hands shaken as he committed himself to something bigger than profit margins and safe choices. And the boys went last. Beck with grim determination, Harris with careful consideration, and Milo with the solemnity of a child who understood sacred things better than most adults. "By blood and by choice," Clara intoned, "we bind ourselves to justice, to protection, to the promise that innocence will not suffer while we draw breath." "By blood and by choice," they repeated, voices carrying across the valley like a prayer or a declaration of war. Martha struck a match and touched it to the contracts, watching Blackwood's lies burn to ash and smoke. The flames licked upward like tongues tasting freedom, consuming the legal fiction that had turned children into property. "It's done," she said, watching the last of the papers curl into nothing. "We're family now, bound by more than blood, bound by purpose." As the ashes scattered on the wind, movement caught her eye on the distant ridge. 3 riders again, but closer this time, bold as brass in broad daylight. "Watchin', waitin', plannin'. They know," Beck said quietly, following her gaze. "Know we're organizing, know we burned the contracts. Blackwood don't like his property destroying his paperwork." Martha shouldered Tom's rifle, action smooth as silk. "Let 'em watch. Let 'em see we ain't backing down." But even as defiance filled her voice, she knew the real test was coming. Blackwood wouldn't be content with surveillance much longer. Soon he'd send more than scouts. Soon he'd send killers. "Clara," she said, "your place got good defensive positions?" "Better'n most. Why?" "'Cause I got a feeling we're gonna need 'em." Martha studied the distant riders, memorizing their silhouettes. "This covenant we just made, it's about to be tested in ways we can't imagine." Thunder rolled closer, and the first fat raindrops began to fall, hitting the dusty ground like tears from a grieving sky. The riders on the ridge wheeled their horses and vanished into the storm, but their message was clear as mountain air. "We're coming." Martha watched them go, rain soaking her hair and clothes, and felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She'd started something here today that couldn't be undone, drawn a line in the dirt that separated the innocent from the guilty, the protectors from the predators. Now all that remained was to see who'd be left standing when the smoke cleared and the blood dried. The storm was here, and Martha Langley aimed to weather it or die trying. The storm hit just past midnight like God's own fury unleashed. Rain hammered the ranch house roof while wind howled through the eaves, and Martha lay awake listening to nature's violence and wondering if it was an omen of what was coming. In the spare room, she could hear the boys resettling every time thunder shook the walls, young minds that had learned to fear sudden sounds and unexpected visitors. By morning, the creek had risen to a torrent, and what started as routine patrol to check the far pastures turned into a fight for survival when the ground gave way beneath their horses' hooves. "Hold tight!" Martha hollered over the rushing water as her mare struggled against the current, Beck's arms locked around her waist, while Harris and Milo clung to Clara's mount. The creek had become a river overnight, brown water churning with debris and carrying enough force to sweep a man away like a twig in a hurricane. Tom Morrison's horse stumbled, and for a heart-stopping moment it looked like deputy and animal both would be claimed by the flood. But Clara's quick thinking and a well-thrown rope hauled them to safety on the far bank, all of them soaked to the bone and grateful to be breathing. "Line shack's just up the ridge," Beck called out, water streaming from his hair. "We can wait out the worst of it there." Martha paused, studying the boy's face. "How'd you know about the line shack?" Beck's eyes went evasive. "Seen it from the ridge yesterday when we was scouting." But that was a lie, and they both knew it. The line shack sat in a hollow, invisible from any ridge line, surrounded by thick pine stands that'd hide it from casual observation. Only someone who'd been there before would know its location so precisely. Boys got more secrets than a deck of marked cards, Martha thought, but kept her suspicions to herself. Time and pressure had a way of shaking truth loose from even the most stubborn tongue. The line shack was little more than 4 walls and a roof, built for riders caught in sudden weather. But it was dry, and that made it a palace after their ordeal in the flood. Clara got a fire going while Martha and Tom saw to the horses, and Samuel, who'd nearly been swept away twice, sat shivering in a corner, banker's suit ruined beyond salvation. "This is madness," Samuel muttered, teeth chattering like castanets. "We're going to get ourselves killed chasing shadows and playing at being vigilantes." "Only shadows here are the ones Blackwood's casting," Tom Morrison replied, checking his waterlogged pistol with the practiced ease of a man who'd learned to depend on his weapons. "And I ain't playing at nothing." Harris moved to the single window, peering through rain-streaked glass at the valley below. "Movement down there," he said. "Riders, maybe 6 or 7, heading toward the main road." Beck joined him at the window, and Martha saw his face go white as fresh snow. "That's Fletcher in the lead," he whispered. "Blackwood's lieutenant." "If he's riding patrol in weather like this, how can you tell from this distance?" Clara asked, voice sharp with sudden suspicion. Beck's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The way he sits his horse. Recognized the posture." Martha felt ice forming in her stomach. Beck knew these men too well, spoke of Blackwood's operation with the familiarity of someone who'd been inside it, not just working for it. And if that was true— "Beck," she said quietly, "I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. No more half answers and evasive looks." The boy's shoulders sagged like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Ma'am, some truths are more dangerous than lies. And some lies get people killed," Tom Morrison growled. "Talk, boy. We're family now, remember? Family don't keep secrets that might get each other murdered." Milo moved to Beck's side, small hand finding his brother's larger one. "It's okay," the youngest whispered. "They ain't gonna hurt us." "And I can feel it." Beck's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back too long. "Y'all remember I told you my last name was Morrison? That ain't the whole truth." Martha's heart sank even as her mind raced ahead to conclusions she didn't want to face. "What's your real name, son?" Beck Blackwood, the boy whispered, voice barely audible above the storm. Cyrus Blackwood is my father. The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel Polk's face went from white to green, like he was fixin' to be sick. Tom Morrison's hand dropped to his gun before he caught himself. Clara just stared, pieces of a terrible puzzle fallen into place in her mind. But it was Harris who voiced what they were all thinking. Your daddy, you're his blood kin, and you didn't think to mention that when we was burning his contracts and making blood oaths. He ain't my daddy! Beck's voice cracked like breaking glass. Threw me away when I was 8 years old, said I was weak, said I'd never amount to nothing. Been living with his operation ever since, but not by choice. They kept me 'cause I could read and write, used me to forge documents and keep books. Martha's mind reeled. Everything made sense now. Beck's knowledge of trafficking routes, his familiarity with Blackwood's men, his ability to navigate terrain he supposedly hadn't seen before. The boy hadn't been just a victim. He'd been forced to be complicit. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Samuel breathed. We got Blackwood's own son in our midst. What's to stop him from riding back to Daddy and telling him everything we're planning? Because, Milo said with quiet certainty, Beck chose us. In the square yesterday, when that gun hand was fixin' to shoot, Beck could have stayed silent, could have let us get taken back, but he helped us escape. Beck's tears were flowing freely now. I know y'all got no reason to trust me. No, this changes everything, but I swear on my mother's grave, she died when I was 6, 'fore he threw me away. I swear I'd rather die than let any of y'all get hurt. Martha studied the boy's face, seeing pain there that went deeper than physical scars. She thought of Tom's investigation notes, of the systematic cruelty that had turned this valley into a hunting ground, of the blood oath they'd sworn just hours earlier. Tom, she said to the deputy, you got handcuffs on you? Tom Morrison nodded slowly, hand moving toward his belt. Then use 'em, Martha said. On me. Everyone stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Ma'am? Beck's voice was small and broken. If this boy's loyal to his father, then I'm a threat that needs eliminating. If he wanted us dead or captured, easiest thing would be to signal them riders down in the valley. But he ain't done that, has he? Martha moved to stand beside Beck, her hand resting on his shoulder. Sometimes family ain't about blood. Sometimes it's about choice. Clara smiled through her tears. Wisdom of the heart, she murmured. Boy's been carrying this burden alone, and look how he's used that knowledge to protect, not betray. But Samuel Polk wasn't convinced. This is insanity. We can't trust him. For all we know, this whole flood, this whole situation is a trap. A trap? Harris's voice was flat with disbelief. You think Beck made it rain, Sam? Think he called down a flood just to trick us? Movement outside caught their attention. The riders in the valley had changed direction, heading toward the line shack's location with purpose that made Martha's blood run cold. They know we're here, Tom Morrison said, checking his rifle. Question is, how? Beck's face went gray. They got ways of tracking people. Dogs, sometimes. Other times. He paused, then reached into his boot and pulled out a small brass object. They put trackers on valuable property. You been carrying a tracker? Samuel's voice rose to a squeak. Had to, Beck replied miserably. They'd know something was wrong if I ditched it too soon. Was gonna lose it in the flood, make it look accidental, but... The sound of horses splashing through the creek below cut off his explanation. 6 riders, just like Harris had counted, and they were climbing toward the shack with the patience of men who knew their quarry was trapped. Got maybe 5 minutes before they get here, Tom said, peering through the rain. This place ain't built for defense. Martha's mind raced through possibilities, all of them bad. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a building that might as well be made of paper when bullets started flying. But Beck's knowledge of these men might be their salvation if she could trust him enough to use it. "Beck," she said, "what's Fletcher's weakness?"
"Every man's got one." The boy's eyes widened with surprise, then hope. He's scared of enclosed spaces, got trapped in a mine shaft as a kid, nearly died, won't go into buildings unless he has to, always leaves himself an escape route. And the others? Kowalski's deaf in his left ear from a rifle accident. Rodriguez is fast with a gun but impatient. The others... Beck's knowledge poured out like water through a broken dam, tactical intelligence gathered through years of unwilling observation. "All right," Martha said, plan forming in her mind like storm clouds gathering for lightning. "Here's what we're gonna do." The next few minutes passed in a blur of preparation. Clara and the boys moved to the back of the shack, ready to slip out the rear window if things went bad. Tom and Martha positioned themselves to cover the front approaches, while Samuel, despite his protests, was given the job of guarding their escape route. The sound of horses stopped just outside effective rifle range. "Beck Blackwood!" Fletcher's voice carried through the storm, rough as gravel and twice as cold. "We know you're in there, boy. Time to come home." Beck moved toward the window, but Martha caught his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Whatever happens, you stay with us." "Ma'am, if I don't answer, they'll come in shooting." "They're gonna do that anyway," Tom Morrison said grimly. "These ain't the kind of men who take prisoners." Beck's young face was torn between fear and determination. "They want me alive. If I show myself, might give y'all time to get away." "Nobody's running," Martha said firmly. "We're family, remember? Family sticks together." The sound of movement outside grew closer, boots squelching through mud, the soft click of weapons being readied. Through the rain-blurred window, Martha could see shapes moving through the trees, closing in like wolves around a wounded deer.
"Last chance, Beck," Fletcher called. "Come out peaceful, and maybe we won't hurt your new friends too bad." In the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains, and Martha felt the storm inside her soul match the one raging overhead. They'd made their choice in that blood ceremony, sworn to protect each other no matter the cost. Now it was time to see if their covenant was stronger than bullets and greed. "Beck," she whispered, "can you get us out of this?" The boy looked at her with eyes older than his years and slowly nodded. "Yes, ma'am, but it's going to require trust in me complete-like." Martha thought of Tom's investigation papers, of children sold like cattle, of a man so evil he'd thrown away his own son. Then she looked at Beck, scared, vulnerable, but standing ready to risk everything for the family he'd chosen over the blood that had rejected him. "Tell us what to do." And as the killers closed in through the storm, Beck Blackwood began to speak. "Fletcher always positions his men in a horseshoe," Beck whispered, his knowledge of enemy tactics flowing like water from a broken dam. "Kowalski and Rodriguez on the flanks, 3 more straight ahead, Fletcher himself hanging back where he can see everything, but stay clear if shooting starts." Martha nodded, mind racing through possibilities as boots squelched closer through the mud. "That deaf ear you mentioned, which side?" "Left, and he's got to tell when he's about to draw, rolls his right shoulder back slight-like." Tom Morrison's eyes glittered with predatory satisfaction. "Been waiting 2 years to put some of these bastards in the ground." "Rodriguez first," Beck continued, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "He's impatient, won't wait for Fletcher's signal if he thinks he's got a clean shot. Take him out quick, and the others'll hesitate." The sound of spurs jingling through the storm grew closer. Clara had the boys positioned by the back window, ready to slip into the night if bullets started flying. Samuel Polk crouched in the corner, banker's courage running thin as water in a drought. "Beck Blackwood," Fletcher's voice boomed through the rain. "Done playing games, boy. Your daddy wants you home, and he ain't asking nice." Martha saw Beck flinch at the word daddy, saw the old pain flicker across his young face. But when he looked at her, his eyes held steady resolve. "Time to see if blood's thicker than choice," he murmured, then raised his voice. "Fletcher, you tell my father I already got a family." The response was a rifle shot that punched through the shack's thin wall, splintering wood inches from Beck's head. Martha dove sideways, pulling the boy down as more bullets followed, turning the interior into a storm of flying debris and deadly lead. "So much for negotiation," Tom Morrison growled, returning fire through the window. His shot took Rodriguez in the shoulder, spinning the man around like a child's toy before he dropped behind a fallen log. "They're moving up," Harris called from the back window. "Two men circling toward the horses." Martha rolled to the side window, Tom's Winchester spitting fire as she tracked movement through the rain. These weren't random outlaws. They moved with military precision, using cover and communication that spoke of professional training. "Beck," Fletcher's voice had turned ugly. "Last chance. Come out or we burn you out." The smell of smoke drifted through the storm even before they saw the flames. Someone had torched the woodpile beside the shack, and with the wind driving sparks against the dry timber walls, the whole structure would be ablaze in minutes. "Back window," Martha ordered. "Now." They moved like a pack of wolves, each covering the other's retreat. Clara went first with Milo, slipping into the night like shadows. Samuel followed, his banker's dignity abandoned in favor of raw survival. But as Harris prepared to climb through, a rifle cracked, and he jerked back with a cry of pain. "Shoulder," he gasped, blood seeping through his fingers. "Ain't too bad, but—" "You're staying with me," Martha said grimly. "Beck, can you get them to the horses?" The boy nodded, then surprised everyone by pulling a Derringer from his boot, a hideout gun he'd been carrying secret-like. "Daddy always said a smart man keeps insurance." "Your daddy was a snake," Tom Morrison spat, "but he ain't wrong about insurance." They burst from the back window in a rush, Martha's rifle blazing as she covered their retreat. Fletcher's men were everywhere, shadows moving through the storm, muzzle flashes lighting up the night like deadly fireflies. Behind them, the line shack caught fire proper, flames licking at the sky despite the driving rain. Beck moved through the chaos like he was born to it, leading them along paths Martha didn't even know existed. His knowledge of the terrain was intimate, supernatural. Every rock, every tree, every game trail mapped in his mind from years of unwilling familiarity. "This way," he called, guiding them down a ravine that offered cover from the worst of the gunfire. "Creek's risen, but there's a crossing upstream." A bullet whined off the rocks beside Martha's head, close enough she could feel the heat of its passage. Behind them, she could hear Fletcher cursing a blue streak as his perfect ambush turned into a run-in fight through terrain that favored the hunted over the hunters. They reached the horses just as Clara was cutting them loose from their picket line. The animals were spooked by the gunfire, ears laid back and eyes rolling white with fear, but years of frontier life had taught them to trust their riders even in chaos. "Mount up!" Martha shouted, hauling Harris into the saddle despite his wounded shoulder. "We ain't staying for the grand finale!" Beck vaulted onto Clara's horse behind Milo, his Derringer barking twice as Kowalski emerged from the tree line. The deaf gunman stumbled, clutching his leg, but kept coming with the grim determination of a man who knew failure meant answering to Cyrus Blackwood. They spurred their mounts into the storm, hooves drumming a desperate rhythm against stone and mud. The creek crossing Beck had mentioned was a boiling torrent of brown water and debris, but it was the only route that wouldn't take them directly through Fletcher's remaining men. "Can't see the bottom!" Samuel yelled over the rushing water. "Then we trust the horses," Martha replied, guiding her mare into the flood. The animal balked for a moment, then plunged forward with the courage that had carried pioneers across 1,000 such crossings. The current was stronger than it looked, tugging at the horse's legs like hands reaching up from hell itself. Martha felt her mare stumble, felt the cold kiss of water around her boots as the animal fought to keep its footing on the slippery creek bed. Behind them, more gunfire erupted as Fletcher's men reached the water's edge. Bullets splashed around them like deadly rain, but the storm and distance made accurate shooting nearly impossible. They reached the far bank with their hearts hammering and their clothes soaked through, but they were alive. Behind them, Fletcher and his remaining men hesitated at the water's edge. Even professional killers had limits, and a flood-swollen creek in the middle of a storm was one of them. "They'll find another way across," Beck said, voice tight with knowledge of how these men thought. "We got maybe an hour before they're on our trail again." Martha studied the boy's face in the lightning-split darkness.
"Where do we go that they can't follow?" Beck's answer surprised her. "Sacred ground." Clara's head snapped up. "What did you say?" "Canyon of the Spirits," Beck continued. 10 miles north. Daddy, Blackwood, he won't let his men go there. Says it's cursed, but really, he's just scared of your people's medicine, Miss Clara." "That place is forbidden to outsiders," Clara said slowly. "Sacred to my ancestors." "I know," Beck replied. "But the spirits there, they don't like what Blackwood's done to this valley. Been whispering to Milo about it, haven't they?" All eyes turned to the youngest boy, who nodded solemnly. "The old ones are angry. They say the land's been poisoned by greed and cruelty. They're waiting for someone to make it right." Martha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. "Milo, what exactly have these spirits been telling you?" "That there's a place where Blackwood keeps his records, his real records.
Proof of everything he's done, everyone he's hurt, hidden in the old mining camp at Devil's Gate."
"Devil's Gate,"
Tom Morrison breathed. "That played-out gold mine up in the high country? Place has been abandoned for 20 years.
"Not abandoned," Beck said grimly.
That's where he keeps the children who won't break, the ones too dangerous to sell. And that's where he keeps the evidence that could hang him if the right lawman ever found it." Lightning illuminated their faces, each one carved by different emotions: hope, fear, determination, and the cold recognition that they'd stumbled onto something bigger and more dangerous than any of them had imagined. "How many men garden this place?" Tom asked. "Dozen, maybe more. Professional killers, not just local gun hands. And the terrain." Beck shuddered. "It's like a fortress."
"Only one way in? Easy to defend? Impossible to assault without heavy losses?" Martha studied their small band: wounded deputy, frightened banker, Cherokee woman with ancient wisdom, 3 traumatized boys, and herself. Against a dozen professional killers in a mountain stronghold, they wouldn't last 5 minutes. But sometimes David had to face Goliath, and sometimes a sling stone was enough to bring down giants. "Can you get us there without Blackwood knowing?" she asked Beck. The boy nodded slowly. "Know every trail in these mountains, every cave and hidden pass. But ma'am, if we go there, if we try to rescue them other children, some of us ain't coming back." "Some things are worth dying for," Martha said, rain plastering her hair to her skull like a shroud. "And protecting innocence is at the top of that list." Clara urged her horse closer, dark eyes reflecting lightning. "The old ways say that some battles choose their warriors, not the other way around."
"If the spirits are calling us to this fight, then we answer," Tom Morrison finished. "Been carrying hate for 2 years. Time to turn it into something useful." Even Samuel Polk, despite his fear, managed a nod. "Lord help me, but I can't live with myself knowing there's children suffering while I sit in my comfortable bank counting money that's built on their pain." They turned their horses toward the high country, toward sacred ground and dangerous truths. Behind them, Fletcher and his men would be searching for another way across the flood, but ahead lay something far more perilous: a reckoning with evil that had been festering in these mountains like an infected wound. The storm was reaching its peak, wind howling through the peaks like the voices of the dead, demanding justice. And as they rode deeper into the wilderness, Martha felt the weight of destiny heavy on her shoulders. Tom had tried to fight this evil alone and died for it. But she wasn't alone. She had family now, bound by choice and blood and the sacred promise to protect innocence from those who'd destroy it for profit. Question was whether love would prove stronger than bullets when the final reckoning came. Behind them, the line shack burned like a beacon against the storm-dark sky, and ahead lay the canyon of the spirits, where the dead whispered secrets and the living prepared for war. The canyon of the spirits opened before them like a wound carved in the earth's flesh, ancient walls rising toward storm-torn sky, while lightning illuminated petroglyphs that had witnessed 1,000 years of human sorrow. Martha guided her exhausted mare down the treacherous path, rain-slick rocks threatening to send them all tumbling into the abyss below. "This place gives me the crawling shivers," Samuel muttered, Banker's voice tight with something deeper than fear.
"Feels like the dead are watching." "They are," Clara said simply, her Cherokee blood recognizing sacred ground even in the darkness. "And they ain't happy about what's been done to their valley."
They found shelter in a cave halfway down the canyon wall, deep enough to hide their presence, but shallow enough to watch for pursuit. Harris's wounded shoulder had gone stiff as rawhide, and Milo was shaken from cold and exhaustion. But it was Beck who worried Martha most. The boy sat apart from the others, staring into the darkness like he was seeing ghosts of his own. "Gotta rest the horses," Tom Morrison announced, though his eyes never stopped scanning the canyon rim for movement. "Push 'em much harder, and we'll be walking." Martha built a small fire, shielding it with rocks so the light wouldn't carry. The warmth felt like salvation after their ordeal in the storm, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by more than just Clara's ancestral spirits.
"Beck," she said gently, "you've been quiet since we left the creek. You all right, son?"
The boy looked up, eyes hollow with something that went deeper than physical tiredness. "Been thinking about what I told y'all back at the shack, about my father." "What about it?" Beck's laugh was bitter as wormwood. "Weren't the whole truth. Never is, with me." The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on cave walls that seemed to lean in close, listening. Martha felt her stomach clench with dread, knowing that whatever was coming next would test their fragile bonds in ways she couldn't imagine. "Tell us," Clara said softly. "Whatever it is, we can bear it together." Beck's hands shook as he pulled something from inside his shirt, a folded paper, creased and stained from years of careful hiding. "This here's my birth certificate. Real one, not the forgery they use for the work contracts." He handed it to Martha, and even in the firelight she could read the truth that made her blood turn to ice water. Father, Cyrus Blackwood. Mother, Sarah Crow. Feather. Crow Feather, Milo whispered. "That's your people," Beck finished, looking at the youngest boy with tears tracking down his cheeks. "My mama was Cherokee, just like Miss Clara. That's how I know about the spirits, about this place. She used to bring me here when I was little, before the fever took her." The silence stretched like a bowstring ready to snap. Samuel Polk was staring at the paper like it was a rattlesnake fixin' to strike. Tom Morrison's jaw worked like he was chewing nails, and Harris had gone pale as moonlight. But it was Clara who broke the quiet, her voice thick with emotion. "Sarah Crow Feather. I knew her when we was girls. Beautiful spirit, kind heart. She loved a white man against her family's wishes, paid the price when he showed his true nature. He threw her away too," Beck said, voice barely above a whisper. "Soon as the novelty wore off,
Soon as she started asking for marriage instead of just company. Kept me around for a few years, treating me like a pet that could read and write. But when I got old enough to understand what kind of man he was, when I started asking questions about Mama's death, Martha's heart broke for the pain in his young voice. He cast you out. Worse, made me part of the operation, said if I was going to be ungrateful, I could earn my keep the hard way. Been forging his documents for 4 years now, keeping his books, helping him turn children into property. Beck's voice cracked like breaking glass. Every contract I wrote, every lie I helped him tell, it's all blood on my hands. That's enough, Harris said suddenly, voice sharp with anger. We trusted you, made you part of our family. And all this time you've been lying to our faces. Harris, Martha started, but the boy was past hearing reason. Don't you Harris me, he snapped, pain and betrayal turning his young face ugly. This whole time, we've been worrying about who to trust, and the enemy's been sleeping in our own bedroll. How we supposed to know anything he's told us is true? Beck flinched like he'd been struck. I never lied about wanting to help y'all, never lied about choosing this family over blood. But you did lie, Samuel Polk said, voice shaken with fear and rage. About your real name, about how deep you are in Blackwood's organization, about how much danger you've brought down on all our heads. Sam's right, Tom Morrison growled, hand resting on his gun butt. Boy's been playing us for fools since day one. Question is, what else ain't he told us? Martha watched Beck's face crumble as the family he'd chosen turned against him, saw the hope die in his eyes like a candle snuffed by cruel wind. The boy who'd saved their lives, who'd shared his tactical knowledge, who'd risked everything to help them escape. He was being judged not for his actions, but for blood he couldn't choose and circumstances beyond his control. Stop, she said, voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made hard choices and lived with the consequences. All of you, just stop. Martha, Tom started, you can't be thinking of trusting him after this. I'm thinking of a boy who could have let us die in that town square, but chose to help us instead. A boy who could have led us into an ambush tonight, but guided us to safety. Martha's voice grew stronger with each word. A boy who's been carrying guilt and shame that ain't his to bear, trying to make amends for sins that were forced on him by a monster wearing his father's face. Beck looked at her with desperate gratitude. Ma'am, I know I should have told y'all sooner, but you were scared, Martha finished. Scared we'd do exactly what we're doing now, judge you for who your daddy is instead of who you choose to be. Clara moved to sit beside Beck, her weathered hand finding his shoulder. Your mama was good people, child. She'd be proud to see you choosing love over hate, family over blood. But Harris wasn't ready to forgive. Easy words, Miss Clara. But how we supposed to know he ain't still working for his daddy? How we know this whole thing ain't been planned from the start? Because, Milo said quietly, if Beck wanted to hurt us, he's had a dozen chances. Could have signaled them riders back at the shack. Could have led us into a trap instead of safety. Could have done 100 things to betray us. But he didn't. Kids got wisdom, Tom Morrison admitted grudgingly. Still don't like being played for a fool. Beck's shoulders sagged with the weight of years-old shame. I ain't proud of what I've been forced to do. Ain't proud of the lies I've told or the documents I've forged. But I swear on my mama's grave, I'd rather die than see any of y'all hurt. Thunder crashed overhead, and in its echo, Martha heard something that chilled her more than the storm. The sound of horses moving careful-like along the canyon rim. Fletcher had found another way across the flood, and he was closing in with the patience of a man who knew his quarry was trapped. They're up there, Beck whispered, recognizing the same sounds that had Martha's blood running cold. Fletcher's persistent, I'll give him that. Won't stop till he's got what he came for, which is you, Samuel said, fear making his voice shrill.
He wants you, not us. Maybe if we what? Martha's voice could have cut steel. Hand over a child to save our own skins? That what you're suggesting, Sam? The banker's face flushed red with shame. I'm suggesting we think practical like. 1 life against 5, and the boy's probably gonna end up back with his father anyway. Clara's hand moved faster than thought, cracking across Samuel's cheek with the sound of a rifle shot. That's enough. This boy chose us. Chose love over fear, chose family over blood. And you want to sell him back to the devil who made his life hell? I'm just saying, Samuel mumbled, rubbing his stinging cheek. You're saying you're a coward, Tom Morrison spat. And cowards got no place in this family. The sound of horses grew closer, accompanied by the soft jingle of spurs and the quiet curse of men moving through treacherous terrain in the dark. They had maybe minutes before Fletcher's patience ran out and he started sending men down into the canyon proper. Beck stood up, young face set with grim determination. I'm gonna give myself up. Like hell you are, Martha said, grabbing his arm. Ma'am, they want me alive. If I surrender, y'all might have a chance to get away, warn folks about Devil's Gate, maybe stop some of this madness. Nobody's surrenderin' nothin', Harris said suddenly, his voice carrying a strength that surprised everyone. Been thinking about what you said, Beck, about choosing family over blood. Well, I'm choosing too. You're my brother, blood or no blood, and brothers don't abandon each other. Milo nodded solemnly. The spirits say some bonds can't be broken by lies or fear or even death.
They say Beck's heart is true, even if his past is dark. Martha felt tears she didn't know she'd been holding start to flow. Here, in this sacred place, surrounded by enemies and betrayal and the weight of impossible choices, she was witnessing something beautiful. A family choosing to stay together despite every reason to break apart. Then we face this together, she said, checking Tom's rifle with hands that no longer trembled. All of us. Thunder rolled across the canyon like the voices of the dead demanding justice, and Martha Langley knew that whatever happened next, they'd meet it as family. The kind of family that was built on choice and love and the stubborn refusal to let evil win. Outside, lightning split the sky, and the hunting began. The storm passed before dawn, leaving the canyon draped in mist that rose from wet stone like the breath of sleeping spirits. Martha watched the sun paint the ancient walls gold while her family, and they were family now, tested by fire and proven true, stirred around the dying embers of their hidden fire. Beck sat cross-legged beside Milo, the 2 boys speaking in hushed Cherokee that Clara had been teaching them through the long night. Hearing his mother's tongue seemed to settle something in Beck's soul, like a piece of himself he'd thought lost forever was finally coming home. Spirits say the path is clear, Milo whispered, dark eyes reflecting morning light. Fletcher's men pulled back to the rim. They're waiting for daylight to try again. Tom Morrison checked his rifle for the dozenth time, water damaged but still functional. How long before they get reinforcements? Day, maybe 2, Beck replied, switching back to English. Fletcher's got pride, won't want to call for help unless he's desperate. But Blackwood, the boy's voice tightened. He don't tolerate failure. Harris flexed his wounded shoulder, testing the range of motion Clara had restored with Cherokee healing herbs. So we got a window. Question is, what do we do with it? Martha had been thinking about that very question through the sleepless night. They couldn't keep running. Fletcher would wear them down eventually, and there were too many innocents depending on them to spend their lives hiding in caves. But attacking Devil's Gate with their small number was suicide, plain and simple. Tell me about the mining camp, she said to Beck. Everything you know. The boy's face went distant, remembering things he'd rather forget. Built into the mountainside, 3 levels carved right out of the rock. Main entrance is a tunnel that opens onto a ledge,
Perfect killing ground if you're defendin'. Guards rotate every 6 hours, dozen men at any given time, maybe more if they're expectin' trouble. Which they will be, Tom Morrison said grimly. Once Fletcher reports we slipped his net. Guards ain't the real problem, Beck continued. It's the layout. Bottom levels where they keep the children who won't break. Isolation cells carved into solid stone. Middle levels the barracks and armory. Top levels where Blackwood keeps his records and his personal quarters when he visits. Clara listened intently, her Cherokee blood recognizing tactical wisdom when she heard it. What about approaches? Game trails, water sources, places where a small group might infiltrate? Beck shook his head. Daddy designed it careful-like. Only way in is through the main tunnel, and that's a death trap for attackers. Been thinking about it all night, and I can't see how we— Wait, Milo interrupted, small hand grabbing Beck's arm. The spirits. They're showing me something. Another way. The boy's eyes went unfocused, like he was seeing things beyond the canyon walls. Clara watched him with the respect her people reserved for those touched by vision, while Martha felt that familiar chill of witnessing something beyond normal understanding. Old mine shaft, Milo whispered. From before the gold played out. Connects to the bottom level through natural caves. The spirits say it's been sealed, but seals can be broken, Beck finished, understanding dawning in his young face. Lord have mercy, there is another way in. You know this shaft? Tom Morrison asked. Beck nodded slowly. Blackwood had it sealed with dynamite when he took over the camp, said it was a security risk. But if it connects to the caves like Milo says, we'd still be outnumbered, Harris pointed out, ever practical despite his youth. But not outgunned, Samuel Polk said suddenly, surprising everyone with his newfound resolve. Martha, your husband's investigation notes mentioned supply runs to the camp. What if I could arrange for one of those runs to arrive early? Martha stared at the banker. Sam, what are you thinking? I'm thinking I got 2 decades of shame to make up for, Samuel replied, voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Been turning blind eyes and deaf ears to Blackwood's business 'cause it kept my bank profitable. Time to pay that debt. It's too dangerous, Martha protested. If Blackwood suspects— He won't, Beck said thoughtfully. Sam's been his inside man for years, feeds him information about which ranchers are vulnerable, which families might disappear without too many questions. Blackwood trusts him. Samuel flinched at the boy's words but didn't deny them. Every month, I arrange financing for supply wagons to the mining camps, food, ammunition, other necessities, all perfectly legal on paper. But what if one of them wagons carried more than supplies? Tom Morrison asked, following the thread of the plan. What if it carried us? Martha finished, hidden inside, ready to strike when they least expect it. Clara smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, it reached her eyes. Coordination with Milo's cave approach. Strike from 2 directions at once. Beck was nodding, tactical mind racing through possibilities. Middle of the day, when most of the guards are resting or drunk. If we could get inside, disable the armory, free the children. Hold on, Harris said, voice sharp with worry. This is sounding like a suicide mission. Even if everything goes perfect, we're talking about taking on professional killers in their own stronghold. Martha looked around their small circle, seeing faces marked by exhaustion and fear, but also by something else. Determination born from love and watered with righteous anger. These people had become her family through choice and trial, and family protected each other no matter the cost. Harris is right, she said quietly. This is dangerous beyond reason. Any of y'all want to walk away, no one will think less of you. Tom Morrison spat tobacco juice into the dust. Been waiting 2 years for a chance to hurt Blackwood where it counts. Ain't walking away now. Clara touched the medicine pouch at her throat. My people believe some fights are chosen by the spirits. This feels like one of them. Even Samuel, hands shaken with fear, managed a nod. Got blood on my ledgers, Martha.
Maybe it's time to balance the books. But it was Milo who spoke the words that settled it. The children in that place, they're praying for someone to come. Been praying so long they've almost given up hope. We can't let their prayers go unanswered. Martha felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. Tom would have been proud of what they were about to attempt. Not the violence, but the love that drove it. The refusal to let evil prosper while good folks turned away. Then we plan it careful, she said. Every detail, every contingency, because we ain't just risking our own lives. We're carrying the hopes of every child Blackwood's hurt. They spent the morning mapping out the assault, using Beck's knowledge of the camp layout and Milo's spiritual guidance to refine their approach. The plan was desperate, maybe hopeless, but it was also their only chance to strike a blow against the system that had turned their valley into a hunting ground. As the sun climbed higher, Martha felt the weight of leadership heavy on her shoulders. She was about to lead people she loved into almost certain death, and the responsibility was near crushing. But sometimes doing right meant accepting terrible burdens, and sometimes love required sacrifice that broke your heart even as it saved your soul. One more thing, Beck said as they prepared to move out. About my father. About Blackwood. When we face him, and we will face him, don't expect mercy. Don't expect him to honor any code of decency. He'll use every dirty trick, every psychological weapon, every cruelty he can think of. Including you, Martha said, understanding the real weight the boy was carrying. Beck nodded miserably. He'll try to turn me against y'all, use my guilt and shame as weapons. Might even work if I ain't strong enough. Clara placed her weathered hand on the boy's shoulder. Your mama's blood runs strong in you, child. Cherokee women don't raise weak sons. When the time comes, you'll choose love over fear, family over blood. Hope you're right, Beck whispered. As they prepared to leave the sacred canyon, Martha took one last look at the ancient walls where spirits had whispered guidance and broken hearts had found healing. Whatever happened at Devil's Gate, they'd face it together, bound by choice, strengthened by trial, and united in the knowledge that some fights were worth everything you had to give. The sun was climbing toward noon, and somewhere in the mountains ahead, children waited in darkness for salvation that might never come. Unless 6 people with nothing but love and stubborn courage proved that sometimes, just sometimes, right could triumph over might. Time to find out if they had enough sand for the fight of their lives. Dawn painted Devil's Gate mining camp in shades of gold and shadow, the fortress carved into living rock looking like some ancient temple dedicated to greed rather than God. Martha crouched behind a boulder on the ridge above, watching Samuel's supply wagon roll up the switchback trail with her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Through Tom's field glasses, she could see guards lounging in whatever shade they could find, rifles propped casual-like against the rocks. Noon shift change was still an hour away, and complacency was their enemy's weakness, the kind of lazy confidence that came from months without serious threat. Wagons through the main gate, Tom Morrison whispered from his position further up the ridge. Sam's selling it good. Looks nervous as a cat in a doghouse, but that's normal for him. In the valley below, Samuel Polk was indeed playing his part perfect, hands shaken as he presented shipping papers to the guard captain, while Beck and Harris lay hidden beneath tarps in the wagon bed. The banking business had taught Samuel how to look frightened and harmless, and today that skill might save all their lives. Phase 1 complete, Martha murmured to herself, then turned toward the narrow cleft in the rocks where Milo and Clara were preparing for their own infiltration. Your turn, little brother. Milo emerged from the shadows like a ghost, Cherokee blood and spiritual guidance combining,
to make him near invisible against the stone. The sealed mine shaft lay 50 yards down a treacherous cliff face, but the boy moved with the confidence of someone following ancient paths known only to the spirits. Clara followed, her own Cherokee heritage allowing her to match the boy's silent movement. Together, they'd break the seal Blackwood had placed on the old workings, then create chaos from below while the wagon team struck from above. Martha checked her pistol one final time, then began her own descent toward the camp's blind spot, a ledge that'd give her a clear shot at the guard tower when the shooting started. Tom would provide covering fire from the ridge while she tried to reach the children Blackwood kept in those stone cells. The plan was desperate, built on hope, and held together with prayer. But sometimes desperate was all you had. Down in the camp, Samuel was arguing with the guard captain about delivery schedules, his natural nervousness disguising the fact that he was buying time for everyone to get into position. Martha could see sweat beading on the banker's forehead despite the mountain chill, could see his hands shake as he shuffled through papers that didn't really matter. Hold steady, Sam, she thought. Just a few more minutes. The explosion came without warning, a muffled crump from deep underground as Milo and Clara breached the sealed shaft. Dust and smoke billowed from vents cut into the mountainside, and suddenly the camp was alive with confused shouts and running men. Now, Martha whispered, and everything happened at once. Tom's rifle cracked from the ridge, dropping the tower guard before the man could raise an alarm. Samuel dove from his wagon seat as Beck and Harris erupted from beneath the tarps, guns blazing at point-blank range into the confused knot of guards around the main gate. Martha sprinted along the ledge, boots slipping on loose stone as bullets whined around her like angry hornets. The camp was designed to repel attack from the main approach, but nobody had planned for assault from 3 directions simultaneously. Below, smoke was pouring from the mine entrance as Clara and Milo fought their way up from the depths, and Martha could hear children's voices, scared, confused, but alive. They were close, so damn close to pulling this off. Then everything went to hell. Cyrus Blackwood himself stepped from the mine entrance, dragging a girl who couldn't be more than 10 years old. Even at distance, Martha could see the family resemblance. This was Beck's father, the monster who'd turned love into cruelty and children into commodities. Enough! Blackwood's voice boomed across the camp, somehow audible above the gunfire and chaos. I got a child here. Y'all want her to live. You stop shooting and we parley. The guns fell silent like someone had thrown a switch. In that terrible quiet, Martha could hear her own breathing, could hear the child's terrified whimpering, could hear Beck's sharp intake of breath as he saw his father for the first time in years. Beck! Blackwood called out, voice carrying false warmth that made Martha's skin crawl. There's my boy. Come home, son. Come home, and we'll forget all about this foolishness. Beck stepped into the open, young face, pale but determined. Let the girl go, old man. Your fight's with me. Blackwood's laugh was like broken glass in a velvet bag, superficially smooth but cutting deep. Oh, my fight's with all y'all, but you especially, boy, ungrateful whelp, biting the hand that fed you, turning against your own blood. You ain't my blood, Beck replied, voice steady despite the tremor Martha could see in his hands. Threw me away, remember? Blood don't make family. Love does. Love? Blackwood's voice dripped contempt. Look around you, boy. Love got your mama killed. Love got that fool rancher Tom Langley thrown from his horse, and Love's about to get this sweet little girl a bullet in the brain. The gun in Blackwood's hand pressed against the child's temple, and Martha felt rage building in her chest like molten iron. This was what evil looked like, not supernatural monsters or fairy tale demons, but a man in expensive clothes who'd learned to profit from human suffering. What do you want? Martha called out, knowing she was exposing herself but unable to watch a child threatened without responding. Martha Langley, Blackwood said, eyes finding her on the ledge. The grievin' widow who started all this trouble. Want my boy back, want my property returned, and want assurance that y'all learned your lesson about interfering with business that ain't yours. And if we refuse? Blackwood's smile was winter cold. Then little Annie here learns to fly the hard way. That's when the world exploded. Clara emerged from the mine tunnel like an avenging spirit, Cherokee war cry echoing off stone walls as she buried a tomahawk in the nearest guard's chest. Milo followed, leading a stream of freed children toward daylight and safety, while guards scrambled to respond to this new threat. The distraction was all Martha needed. Her shot took Blackwood in the shoulder, spinning him away from the child as his own weapon flew wide. Beck charged forward, tackling in his father to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury, years of suppressed rage finally finding outlet. "You killed my mama!" Beck screamed, fists flying even as Blackwood tried to draw a hideout gun. "Threw me away like garbage! Made me help you hurt innocent kids!" But Blackwood was stronger, older, more experienced in violence. His knee caught Beck in the stomach, doubling the boy over, and suddenly the hideout gun was pressing against Beck's forehead. "Should have stayed grateful," Blackwood snarled. "Should have remembered who owns you." Martha's second shot took him center mass, the impact lifting Blackwood off his feet and sending him sprawling in the dust. He tried to rise, tried to bring his gun to bear on the approaching woman, but strength was flooding out of him along with his blood. "Nobody," Martha said, standing over the dying man with smoke curling from her rifle barrel, "owns my children." The camp fell quiet, except for the sounds of children crying and freed prisoners stumbling toward sunlight. It was over. Finally, impossibly, it was over. But victory tasted bitter as wormwood when Clara didn't rise from where she'd fallen, tomahawk still clutched in lifeless fingers, and Cherokee blood soaking into unholy ground. The price of justice, Martha realized, was always higher than you expected to pay. As the sun climbed toward noon, painting Devil's Gate in harsh light that revealed every ugly detail, Martha Langley held Beck while he cried for the father who'd never loved him, and the surrogate mother who'd died setting him free. Some battles were won with bullets, but the healing would take much longer. Spring came gentle to Clearwater Valley that year, like the land itself was trying to heal from the wounds that had festered too long in shadow and silence. Martha stood in her rebuilt kitchen, watching through windows that no longer needed iron bars as children's laughter echoed across the ranch yard. Not just Beck, Harris, and Milo anymore, but 8 more rescued souls who'd found their way to sanctuary. 6 months since Devil's Gate. 6 months since Clara's sacrifice had broken the back of Blackwood's operation and freed more than 30 children from lives of systematic cruelty. 6 months since Martha Langley had become not just a widow grieving her lost husband, but a mother to every child who needed one. "Ma," Milo called from the garden where he was planting seeds in soil that had been blessed by Cherokee ceremony and watered with tears of joy. The boy had taken to calling her that natural as breathing, and each time it made her heart swell with the kind of happiness she'd thought was buried with Tom. "What is it, sweetheart?" she replied, wiping flour from her hands as she stepped onto the porch. The sight that greeted her was better than any sunrise she'd ever witnessed. Children of all ages working together in the garden, their faces bright with health and hope, instead of the hollow-eyed desperation she'd first seen in that dusty town square. "Beck says we should plant the memory tree here," Milo pointed to a spot near the garden center, "where Miss Clara can watch over everything that grows." Martha's throat tightened with emotion. The memory tree, a young oak they'd chosen to honor Clara's sacrifice, would stand as living testimony to the Cherokee woman who'd died so others could live free. Every spring when it leafed out, every fall when it turned gold, it would remind them that love sometimes required the ultimate price. "That's perfect," she said, voice thick with feeling. "Miss Clara would like knowing she's part of something that feeds folks." Beck looked up from where he was digging. No longer the haunted, secretive boy she'd first met, but a young man growing into his strength. The Langley name suited him better than Blackwood ever had, and the legal adoption papers hanging framed in the parlor made it official. Family by choice, not chance. Mail riders comin'. Harris called from the barn where he was mendin' harness, with the patience of someone who'd learned that honest work was its own reward. The middle boy had grown 2 inches and filled out considerable since their ordeal. Good food and safety working miracles on young bodies that had known too much hardship. Martha shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun, recognizing the Postal Service rider long before he reached the ranch gate. News traveled slow in these parts, but it traveled sure, and she had a feeling today's delivery would be significant. "Mrs. Langley," the rider called, touching his hat brim respectful-like. "Got official correspondence from Denver, territorial government." The envelope was thick, official-looking, with enough seals and stamps to choke a horse. Martha opened it careful-like, aware that her children had gathered close to hear whatever news had warranted such formal delivery. "By order of Territorial Governor Samuel Crawford," she read aloud, "Martha Langley is hereby appointed Special Consultant for Child Welfare Protection, with full authority to investigate reports of labor exploitation and human trafficking throughout Colorado Territory." The rest was legal language, but the meaning was clear. Their fight at Devil's Gate had reached all the way to the territorial capital, and now Martha had official backing to continue the work Clara had died for. "What's it mean, Ma?" asked little Annie, the girl Blackwood had threatened in those final moments at the mining camp. She'd been the hardest to heal, nightmares and sudden fears that required patience and gentle care, but lately she'd been laughing more than crying. "Means we're going to keep helping children who need help," Martha explained. "Means what we did mattered to folks in high places." Tom Morrison chose that moment to ride up the valley road, deputy's badge catching sunlight as he guided his horse through the gate. The lawman had been a regular visitor these past months, partly for business. There were still Blackwood associates to round up, still legal proceedings to navigate, but mostly because he'd found something here that reminded him what he'd become a peace officer to protect. "Afternoon, Martha," he said, dismounting with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "Heard tell the territorial government's taken an interest in our little valley." "Official interest," Martha confirmed, handing him the letter. "Seems like children matter to more folks than we thought." Tom read through the document, his scarred face breaking into the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since his own ranch was stolen. "About damn time." Been too many years of looking the other way while evil prospered. "Language, Tom," Martha chided gently, nodding toward the children. "Sorry, ma'am. Been too many years of looking the other way while unfortunate circumstances prospered." The children giggled at his awkward correction, and Martha felt that familiar warmth spread through her chest. This was what family sounded like: gentle teasing, shared joy, the comfortable rhythm of people who'd chosen to build something beautiful together. "Any word from the territorial marshal?" she asked. Tom's expression grew serious. 3 more trafficking operations shut down based on intelligence we recovered from Devil's Gate. Dozens of children freed, sent back to families or placed with good folks who'll treat 'em right. He paused, voice dropping lower. Also found evidence that Blackwood's network reached clear to California. We barely scratched the surface of what that snake was involved in. Martha nodded grimly. Evil like Blackwood's didn't exist in isolation. It required networks of complicit people, systems that valued profit over human dignity, communities that chose blindness over action. But systems could be changed, one heart at a time, one family at a time. "Well," she said, "reckon we got our work cut out for us." As evening painted the valley in shades of gold and purple, Martha gathered her extended family around the kitchen table for supper. 11 children now, plus Tom, who'd taken to staying for meals more often than not,
plus Samuel Polk, who'd found redemption in honest work and genuine friendship. Before they ate, Milo spoke the Cherokee blessing Clara had taught him, words that honored the land, the food, and the spirits of those who'd gone before. It was becoming tradition, this moment of gratitude before breaking bread together. "For those who came before," Milo intoned, "for those who stand with us now, and for those who'll come after, may love always triumph over fear, may family always matter more than blood, and may no child ever again know the loneliness of having nowhere to belong." "Amen," they chorused, voices blending like a choir that had found perfect harmony. After supper, as children scattered to evening chores and adult conversation turned to plans for expanding the ranch to accommodate more refugees, Martha found herself on the porch with Beck. The two of them sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge over mountains that no longer held quite so much darkness. "You ever regret it?" Beck asked quietly. "Taking us in, fighting Blackwood, all of it?" Martha considered the question seriously. The past 6 months had brought challenges she'd never imagined. Legal battles, financial strain, the constant work of healing traumatized children. But they'd also brought purpose, joy, and the kind of deep satisfaction that came from knowing your life mattered. "Only thing I regret," she said finally, "is that it took me so long to understand what Tom was trying to do. Might have saved Clara if I'd acted sooner." "Clara died saving children," Beck replied. "Don't think she'd change that choice, even knowing the cost." From inside the house came the sound of Harris reading to the younger ones, his voice steady and warm as he worked through the adventures of Robinson Crusoe. Simple domestic happiness, the kind that evil tried to destroy, but love kept rebuilding. "Ma?" Beck's voice carried a question he'd been holding for months. "What is it, son? Think we'll ever stop looking over our shoulders? Ever feel safe enough to just be a normal family?" Martha smiled, reaching over to squeeze his calloused hand. "Beck, honey, we ain't never gonna be normal." "Normal families don't adopt orphans by the dozen or fight trafficking rings in mountain fortresses. But safe?" She gestured toward the ranch that had become a beacon for the lost and forgotten. "We're as safe as love and determination can make us." In the distance, thunder rumbled over the peaks, not threatening this time, but promising the gentle rain that had helped their garden grow. Martha thought of Tom, of Clara, of all the children who'd found home in this valley, and felt the deep satisfaction of work well done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new children needing shelter, new battles against those who'd profit from human suffering. But tonight, her family was safe, fed, and together, and sometimes that was enough to change the world. "Y'all, I ain't gonna lie to you. Telling this here story about Martha and her boys near about tore my soul clean out and left it bleeding in the dust. There's something about watching broken folks find wholeness in each other that cuts deeper than any blade, reaches places in your heart you didn't even know were there. Truth is, this tale ain't just about one widow and 3 lost children building family on hardscrabble Colorado ground. It's about all of us wandering through this harsh world, searching for that sacred place where somebody looks you in the eye and says them sweetest words any soul can hear. You belong here. Martha could have rode past that auction block, minded her own grief like most folks do when evil shows its face in broad daylight. But she didn't. She stepped into the fire when stepping away was safer, opened her heart when keeping it shuttered was wiser, and built something beautiful from the shattered pieces of other people's pain. Beck could have stayed bitter about his daddy's abandonment, let that poison eat him alive from the inside like cancer in the bone. Instead, he learned that blood don't make family. Choice does. Sometimes the family you forge in love's furnace burns brighter than any tie of flesh ever could. See, the hard lesson this story teaches is that standing up to systematic evil always costs more than you reckon when you start the fight. Clara paid with her life. Martha paid with her peaceful widowhood. Them children paid with innocence that can never be restored. But what they built together,
that sanctuary, that fierce protective love, that stubborn refusal to let cruelty prosper, that's worth more than all the gold these mountains ever yielded. Greed'll bury a man deeper than any grave, but love plants roots that grow stronger with every storm that tries to tear 'em up. Martha's ranch became more than property lines and legal papers. It became proof that even in this unforgiving country, kindness ain't weakness, and protecting the helpless ain't foolishness. The West teaches hard truths. Trust is rarer than water in the desert. Family is what you make it. And sometimes the most important stand you'll ever take is just opening your door to someone who's got nowhere else to go. In a land where might usually makes right, these folks prove that love can be mightier than bullets when it's backed by enough courage to matter. So next time you see someone getting knocked down by life's cruelties, maybe you'll remember Martha Langley standing up in that dusty square and know, sometimes salvation starts with just saying, "You can stay." Thanks for riding this trail with me, partners. Hope it left marks on your heart like it did mine. Which moment in Martha's journey cut deepest into your soul? Drop a comment about the scene that moved you most. Smash that follow for more frontier tales where love conquers cruelty. And share this story with folks who need reminding that family ain't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice.